We all know that people are now lonelier than ever, and hardly anyone's talking about this. Some people pretend to give a shit, but they really don't. You remember that 27% stat, the 27% of men 18 to 30 haven't had sex ever in the last year, or the two numbers are pretty damn similar if I remember correctly. Are you familiar with the concept of Boomervilles? There's these suburban towns where most of the people there are boomers, like the average age is like 40, 50, 60 or something. There's almost no or often none at all social spaces other than maybe a park or two, which is kind of where I'm at now. There's just nowhere for young adults to meet other people outside of college. And if you go to college, it's not the same as what the movies and all that would lead us to believe. And especially with everyone who has to commute there, people can't afford to live on campus anymore. Even in past decades, if most people didn't live on campus, even less people live on campus now. Now, what this has created is, since there's nowhere for people my age, and I'm 22, by the way, going to be 23 in this new year, what this often creates is these huge groups of people, as we can see by the stats, who are basically going to be lonely for years, if not ever, with the way things are going. And since there's this gap of places to meet people, we have these online dating sites that have popped up to, so to speak, fill the void. But, they aren't designed to work. Think about it this way. If people were being paired off with these websites, or these apps, or whatever the fuck, if people are actually being paired off, their customer base would shrink as people are being paired off, and that would be bad for business. So they're not designed to do that. The shit harmony, eHarmony, they're every 14 minutes somebody finds love. Well, if we suppose that they have 1 million users, and they probably have much more than that, but if we suppose they have 1 million users, so so how many minutes are in a year? And we take that, divide it by 14, that's your number of chances in a year out of 1 million. And if you turn that into a percentage, that's about 3.7%. Or roughly, it's rounded up to 4. It doesn't really matter. Either way, it's tiny as fuck. So a 4% chance of you find a partner in a year. And that's assuming that everybody has the same odds, which they don't. That there's 1 million users, which I said there's probably much more. And that there's an equal number of men and women, which usually it's like 70-80% guys, so good luck with that. Now, how did it get this way? Now, Boomervilles, as I've said before, Boomervilles created this void, this depletion of youth, a fucking cancer on our youth, by depriving us of the social spaces of previous generations, depriving us of the chances of dating that previous generations had, and the dating apps just completely removes the human element too. You're not going to get a good idea of who somebody is just from reading a bio or whatever on them. This is just not the same. So you get this society, this society that increasingly values looks more and more and status more and more, because of the fact that the human element has been completely removed by the modern dating world. And on top of that, people are working longer hours than they ever have been, and we have stagnant wages, while at the same time the real costs of living have been rising. Wages have been stagnant roughly since the beginning of the 80s, with de-industrialization, the disaster that was. Although they'll tell us that the free trade was good, we can see that's complete horseshit. Because while real wages have been stagnant since then, cost of living has continued to go up by like every metric. The housing cost, healthcare costs, education costs past high school, that's all gone up by at least 50% or more in that same time period. And that means people have less time to do stuff like date, for example. We really need to understand this more as a systemic issue And this loneliness really acts more like a chronic illness, because with millions of people, not just in this country, but probably across the world as well, maybe even tens or hundreds of millions by the way we're going, even tens or hundreds of millions of people by the way things are going. You see, loneliness does physically harm health. It's been determined that unmarried people live about 15 to 20 years shorter than married people, and that's just marriage. That's not counting like if you've never had relationships at all or anything, and that's already the equivalent of smoking a pack a day or two, or maybe even 3. And people often who are chronically lonely, like the people on like the Forever Alone and all that, have these, like, we'll have these periods of time when we'll be generally okay, we're not thinking of it, and then we'll have these flare-ups that may last for a variable amount of times, where we get depressed about it, almost like a disease, really. And that's what it really is. It's a social disease, and it's costing us not just in our happiness, but in our real, like, material, physical well-being. This is going to be more of a burden on our already shit healthcare system as we go into the future further and further. There's challenges to change this. Now, people tend to blame the individuals, like, oh, it's your fault you're lonely, you must not have been working hard enough or whatever. And that's fucking horseshit. If the statistic is that bad, the 27% statistic, if that's that bad, it's not like millions of people just decided to stop trying. It's very obviously a severe social problem, and people need to stop treating it like it's an individual problem, because that's never solved anything. That's not solving climate change, trying to sort of like, oh, you need to reduce your carbon footprint, instead of the power companies and the mega mansion CEO types who are pumping tons and tons and metric fuck tons of CO2 into the air. But oh yeah, it's your problem. You took a leisurely drive on Saturday for an extra 30 minutes. Oh no, you put a couple extra pounds of CO2 into the air. It's your fault that all this is happening. And we see these on TV and on social media, these unrealistic ads and perpetuations of this individualistic fallacy, that this is an individual problem that we can just magically solve if everybody just tried harder or did something different. But it's not. If that were the case, it would never be this bad. What we really need to do is we need to push. Well, one of the things we need to do is we need to push against big tech, because these dating apps are fucking terrible. They're going to continue to make things even worse than they already are. What these apps are designed to do is they're designed to create an underclass of people who are forced to take these basically lottery odds, because that's what it is, the love lottery, unless you're incredibly traditionally good looking and all that. They create this perpetual underclass of people who are forced to keep paying into these apps for that minute chance that they may find what they're looking for. We need to push back against big tech. We need to push back against Silicon Valley, because they're the ones really benefiting from this. They're like the only ones benefiting from this, other than those top few people on those apps. We need to create communities so that people can come together and meet each other organically, like they used to in previous generations. And we need to fight this service economy horseshit. Now, bring back the manufacturing, because all of this shit, we can tie this back to when the manufacturing left. And don't let them tell you, oh, but the trade agreements, the free trade will make everybody better off. Because if you look at how the cost of living has fared, how people's real conditions have fared over those 40 years, everything's gotten worse. Like practically everything economically has gotten worse. Don't believe this stupid service economy horseshit, because if we keep going down this path, by 2050, the only jobs left will be coding. Most people be unemployed. You'll be scraping by on the shit UBI they give you, and you'll be even lonelier than before. So push back anytime anybody says embrace the service economy or anything. Give them the fucking middle finger. Don't buy this shit. Okay, that's a quick rundown. I'm going to do more future videos on the more detailed on some of these sub-points.